Hey there, welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So whether you're a grizzled veteran with an emotional shell so hardened that hearing "Have a Little Faith in Me" alone in a bar doesn't even make you cry anymore, or else a scrappy upstart finding deep layers of meaning in songs that Bob Dylan never even intended for release, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here this month. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know where I'll be in the coming month. If you want to hear some of my songs live, I'll be on tour this fall. Embarking for Australia and New Zealand next week. The tour will stop in Auckland, Melbourne, Sydney, Minion, and Perth. Check the website for those exact dates and places. I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you down there. It's been too long. And then later in the fall, I'll be touring the U.S. I'll be in Greensboro, North Carolina at the Carolina Theater on November 11th. Atlanta at Eddie's Attic on November 13th. Tampa at the Strauss Center on November 14th. Tallahassee at the Goodwood Museum on November 15th, although tickets for that might be sold out, so check before you come. Jacksonville at the Riverside Fine Arts Center on November 17th. Gainesville on the 18th. Then I'll be at the Turf Club in St. Paul, Minnesota on December 1st. Space in Evanston, Illinois on December 2nd for an early and a late show. And then Indianapolis on December 3rd, which will close out the year for me, most likely. If you've been enjoying the podcast so far, or if you listened to it today for the first time and enjoy it, you, the listener, can play a meaningful part in its continued viability by doing two entirely free, entirely painless, I promise painless things, and both of them are from your smartphone. First, you can rate the show in your podcast app, which literally takes less than a minute. You don't even have to write anything. You can just click a number of stars. Second, you can recommend the show or a particular episode to a friend who you think might dig it. That's just as easy and quick as the rating process. It's within your podcast app. You just click on the little square with the arrow coming out of the top, and it'll pop up a menu for you to text it or email a link to a friend or 5 friends. Why live meekly? So those are the two things that you can do to help support the show. And I promise you that both of those things, even combined, will be much less of a pain in the ass for you than they will help me. They will help me a great deal more than they'll put you out. So that's the simple math, and I hope you'll do that. But of course, you also don't have to do that. And you can just listen to the episode as well. That's fine. That's all the harassment that I have for you this month. It was a really fun episode. I'm so grateful to Hayes for him coming over to my kitchen on the east side of Austin because he's been very busy this year touring and promoting his new album, Lovers and Leavers. So thank you, Hayes, for taking the time out, and thanks, guys, for listening. Hope you enjoy. My guest this month is Hayes Carll. Born in 1976 in the Woodlands, Texas, just a half hour north of Houston, he arrived at music a little later than some, not picking up a guitar until age 15. The first album he ever owned was a Kenny Rogers Greatest Hits, but it didn't take him too long to discover Bob Dylan, and with all due respect to the gambler, we're all the richer for it. After a few collegiate years in Arkansas, he moved to Crystal Beach, Texas, and began playing roughneck bars. That is a baptism by fire, if I've ever heard of one. He remembers the sign in front of one of those gigs reading, "All you can eat fried chicken in Hayes Carll, $4.99. In 2002, he released his debut album, Flowers and Liquor, which earned him one of his earliest and dearest champions, the late great Guy Clark. The two would later go on to write together for Hayes' sophomore album. After some regional success in Texas, Universal's Lost Highway imprint signed him and shepherded him onto the national stage with two of his most successful albums, Trouble in Mind and K-Mag Yo-Yo. He's appeared on Austin City Limits and The Tonight Show. He's been nominated for and has won a whole slew of Americana Music Association awards over the years. And recently, Leanne Womack's rendition of his song Chances Are earned him a Grammy nomination for Best Country Song. The New York Times declared him an heir to outlaw country royalty like Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Ray Wylie Hubbard. Ken Tucker of NPR once rightfully warned, "Never underestimate the guys with sleepy eyes and heartache in their voices. They're sometimes the guys that really get you where you live." But when he's off the road, Hayes lives in Austin, Texas. And that's where we sat down this week to chat. I want you to take me back to Crystal Beach in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and tell me what that scene was all about.
Well, Crystal Beach was it was a scene. I mean, culturally, it was an interesting place. I grew up in the suburbs, just to put it in context, and as to maybe why it was so special to me. Because I grew up in sort of this planned community, and it was pine trees and golf courses and
Sure.
collared shirts and BMWs, and I always had this sort of. I always felt like I was missing out on some kind of real life, like I was in this very sterilized, white bread, conservative environment. And then I went off to college, and that was, different. It opened me up to some different things and different people, but it was still a bit of a bubble.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to Crystal Beach, which is one of 4 towns on a peninsula called the Bolivar Peninsula, in southeast Texas, I moved down there with the idea that I wanted to be a songwriter. I'd gotten out of college. I'd graduated last in my class with a history degree, and I was completely unemployable.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's by design or just how it worked out, but it ended up being a really positive thing for me because a lot of my friends were getting jobs and making money, and in those early years, I started to question, do I want to really do this? I knew I wanted to, but I just always told myself, I'm going to try it because I don't want to die having not tried. Yeah. So I'll go try it. I have this time. I'm young and I have the opportunity, and but after a couple of years of not doing well and having to work miserable jobs and seeing my friends have vehicles and girlfriends and stuff like that, I started to question my career path, but I didn't really have any other options at that moment, and so turned out to be a positive thing in a way because there was a desperation to it. Like not only did I feel like I needed and had to do this, but what else was I going to do? So I might as well do this thing that brought me some joy. And
what's interesting to me, though, is, it's not like you're like, all right, I'm going to start a career in music, so I'm going to head to Nashville, I'm going to head to Los Angeles. You're like, no, I'm heading down to Crystal Beach, and I'm going to just work in clubs, or you just wanted more life experience at that time?
Yeah, it was a bit of a combination of, one, I didn't know how you go about being a musician.
Right.
The idea of California, New York never even crossed my mind. Those just seemed like Mars and Venus. and Nashville, I had recorded a couple of tracks when I was in college. A buddy of mine snuck me in a studio late at night, and it had been passed around somehow to somebody, and I got not an email. This was sort of pre-email heyday. I got a letter from a guy, some publishing company in Nashville, saying, "We like your songs, and if you'll pay us $100 or $200 or whatever, and give us the rights to them, you come up here and record them, and we'll do big things."
You're going somewhere.
Yeah. And I grew up watching those behind the music episodes and reading books, how you get screwed in the country music business, and so I was hyper aware of this idea that there were these traps and pitfalls out there, and so anyway, but that was sort of my only contact with Nashville, and and I was really familiar with the history of it, but I didn't know what you do, and I hadn't done anything. I'd lived in a dry county in college. I had very little performing experience under my belt, and I'd written a handful of songs. Right. This was just a dream and something that I was inspired by other people who did it, and I felt that maybe I might have some aptitude for it, and that it was a calling, and there were things I wanted to say, and so I really just needed some time alone and sort of a testing ground to find myself and see if I could do this. And Crystal Beach was perfect for that, because it's this kind of remote, extremely remote stretch of beach. You have to take a ferry to get there if you're coming from Galveston Island, and then you get there and you drive 15 miles and it's cows and pastures, and then you get to this little town, and the first week that I moved there, it was a tropical storm, and I watched houses wash away, and I was kind of like Noah. All these animals came and lived on my front porch, and I just was there by myself, and I think I was the only full-time resident in this, out of 100 houses that were in this beach community. And so it just created a really solitary environment, and you had the ocean right in front of you. And it's the shittier side of the Gulf of Mexico, but it was an ocean, and the power and force and mysticism of that, and hearing the waves at night and falling asleep with that and feeling that breeze and the stars. It was magical for me, and it was worth all the lights of New York City at that time, but I was very alone. I was very isolated, and then I just started going and hanging out in bars, trying to meet people. And there was one place in particular called Bob's Sports Bar and World Famous Grill, and I would go there to watch Astros games or Texans games. I'm a big sports fan, and I would sit there and and every once in a while I'd make a conversation with somebody, but at one point, I went to Bob and I said, "I play guitar and sing. If I set up in the corner there, you don't have to pay me anything, but maybe I could put a tip jar out. And what do you think? It's good. It would be, maybe it's good for you, free entertainment, and for me, a chance to sing." And he said, "Sure." And so I did that, and I set up, and I went and bought myself a little PV acoustic amp. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Wait, is it the one that it literally folds into a briefcase? Is it one of those?
No. It was just big enough to be heavy on a walk longer than 10 yards.
Sure.
But it was just sort of a one big amp, but it had two inputs, one for a microphone and one for your guitar. Mm-hmm. So for a solo singer-songwriter, acoustic player, it was perfect. So I bought a mic stand and a cheap microphone, and then I had my rig. I didn't need a whole PA. I just had this thing, and I would sort of put it on my side and aim it towards whatever wherever there was more than one person, and plug in, and then I would play. I had a 4-hour slot.
Oh wow!
And so I did it, and the music that I hadn't written a whole lot at that point, and I'm not a very good guitar player. But the one talent I had for sure at that point was that I could remember the words to all these songs that I had grown up listening to, and so I could sit there and play for hours and not break a sweat. And I loved it. I was getting to play Prine and Christopherson and Dylan and whatever in between, George Strait or God, I can't even remember now all this stuff, but there was no shortage of songs, and there was what there was a shortage of people to listen to it. So there'd be maybe 2 people there, or 5 people, or and there was a character named Homer who was a retired CPA. His name was Homer Fry, and his brother had some notoriety for creating a surfboard brand or something. But anyway, Homer lived in a trailer behind the bar, and he would come in, and he was probably 75 years old, and he would have these mesh shirts and a ball cap, and he would smoke these Virginia Slim 120s and drink Pabst Tall Boys. And he would sit at the corner of the bar, and there were many days where he was my only audience, and he would heckle me and get me grief. He'd be like, "You're not trying. That's not good enough. You're gonna have to do better than that." And it was like I felt like Rocky, and he was
Mickey.
Mickey, and because he was doing it for my own good. I mean, I think he got a kick out of it, but I found out later, as people did start showing up, if anybody got out of hand, if anybody was threatening to me, if anybody was not respectful of me, he was in their face. And so because it was really easy to check out and just get drunk and play the slot machines and whatever, and he would be on me like, "That's not going to cut it, kid." And so when Homer died, they buried him with the remote control from Bob's Sports Bar.
God bless America.
So this is what I walked into.
Yeah.
This was my first gig, and then that led to this whole series of other bars that were on the peninsula there, and sort of became a thing for a couple of years.
And up into Galveston. And when did you sort of get on the radar and start interacting with like the older guard of musicians from Texas, guys like Ray Wiley or what's the fellow that owns the Old Quarter in
Rex
Galveston?
Bell.
Yeah, Rex.
Yeah.
When did you come on their radar?
Well, I was my minor celebrity in Crystal Beach had not translated into not needing to have a job. So so I was working wherever I could. I was doing landscaping. I was digging ditches. I was a medical test patient. All kinds of stuff. But I had a job as a waiter for a while in Galveston. So I would ride the ferry over to Galveston and work, and then catch the ferry back home at night. And one night I went out with some staff, and this is probably 2000, or maybe just right before. And by this point I was starting to, I was gigging pretty regularly on the peninsula, but again, for 5 people, 10 people a night. And we went out one night, and we're heading to some club or something, and it was closed. And so we turned down an alley to get back to where we were going. And I walked down this alley, and it's interesting to think about those things that change your life. You turn this way down a street, and your life is forever changed. And that's what happened with me. I took a right down this alley, and I heard music, and I looked inside, and there was this little stage, this little club called the Old Quarter Acoustic Cafe. And I walked inside, and there was someone on stage. There was this shrine to Townes Van Zandt on one wall, and then Blaze Foley on another wall.
There you go.
And behind the bar was this really attractive girl who was an exotic dancer, and then there was a guy who was an attorney named Rick, and they both worked for free. They just hung out because they liked the scene. And it was an open mic night. which I've come to dread in my later years as I'm jaded and but at that point, I just wanted anybody to hear me. I just wanted to be on a stage, and this looked like a legitimate music venue, which I don't think I'd ever really seen before. Yeah. And I said, I've got a guitar in my trunk. Can I go grab it and can I play some songs? And he said, sure, but they better be good. So something along those lines. And Rex was the owner, and Rex, I found out, pretty quickly had this interesting life path where he played bass for Lightning Hopkins, and then that led to some stuff for Lucinda, and then ultimately Townes Van Zandt, and so I went out and got my guitar, and I came in. I think I played some Lyle Lovett songs and maybe Christopherson or something, and played a couple songs, and that got me in. That was my entree into the Old Quarter, which is just this tiny speck on the map of the world, but
culturally, it's not a tiny speck. It casts a larger shadow.
Yeah, it had a history because the original Old Quarter was in Houston, and so Townes cut a live record there, live at the Old Quarter, and it was, from what I understand, sort of this gathering place for Lightning Hopkins and Dusty Hill and Guy Clark and Lyle Lovett, and just this whole mix of people. But for me, it was a place to play music, to have kindred spirits, and there was a real emphasis on songwriting. That I wasn't getting that fix doing my covers 4 hours a night, 6 nights a week at these beach bars for drunk kind of folks. And yeah.
At that point, had you written your first song or two that when you finished it, you kind of felt to yourself like, oh, this is something. Or had you not gotten to that point yet?
I had a few things. That, some of which I still play today, it just feels like that was luck,
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I know.
How did you do that? You had no idea what you were doing.
I know. That's it.
But so I went in there, and there'd been no, there's no school for songwriting, or not that I was exposed to, and I went in the Old Quarter, and not only was there these open mic nights and this sort of community locally of people, some good, some decent, some not.
Yeah.
But it was a community for me, but yeah, I think just as importantly, or maybe more than that, is it was people would come through and perform there, and that's how your question was, how did I become aware and meet these people? It was through that, because I think it was Wednesday and Thursday were open mic nights, and Friday and Saturday was the actual shows. And he would get the Sisters Morales and Ray Wiley Hubbard and Willis Allen Ramsey and Vince Bell and Steve Fromholtz and Shake Russell and Dana Cooper and Steve Young, and just this really top flight singer-songwriters.
Yeah.
And they would come through, and so I was exposed to that, and I got to see what they do and how they performed and what their songs were like and their styles, and read about them and study them and get to meet them. And so it was just really educational for me. And then I would get to try out my stuff at the open mic nights, and then eventually I got to open for these guys. Rex became sort of like a mentor, father figure. I mean, I call him the father I'm lucky I never had, and he calls me the kid he wishes he'd aborted. Just give you any idea of Rex's sense of humor. Yeah. But it was, he did help me and kind of guide me I got to listen endlessly as this kind of wide-eyed kid to stories about towns and Blaze and Dusty Hill and Lightning Hopkins and that was my church, sitting there and playing poker heads up with Rex and 10 Bar and meet girls and watch these amazing songwriters.
Yeah. And was Guy Clark coming through at that point and playing, or was he just kind of installed up in Nashville at that point?
Yeah, I don't think he had come to so the original Old Quarter burned down, and Rex opened the Acoustic Cafe in 92 in Galveston, and Towns played there. I'm sorry, I think it was 96, because I moved there in 98, and Towns played there right before I discovered it, and had died shortly thereafter. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just totally went off in a different direction. What was the question?
The question was Guy Clark coming through to play as well, or was he already installed up in
Guy?
Nashville?
Yeah, that's why. Just thinking about Guy, I had to start like going to a stoned state. So Guy hadn't played there. He didn't play there until many years after. He finally came down and did a gig right after the Hurricane Ike. And I think they actually had to move it to a different venue because the Old Quarter had been flooded. I met Guy a couple years after the early 2001, 2002 at I did a festival in Spring, Texas, and I was friends with JT Van Zandt.
Yeah.
And you know JT?
I do.
Yeah. And I was, the first act of the day, and then it was somebody else, and JT and the Guy was the headliner. And afterwards we went to a party at a private ranch, and it was Kimmy Rhodes and her husband Joe Gracie, who's since passed, but iconic radio personality, but he had lost his voice, and he had it carried around an Etch-a-Sketch. Or no, what's the thing where you write and then you lift the piece of paper and it disappears and you put it back down?
I don't know. It's not an Etch-a-Sketch though. It's I know what you're talking about.
Okay, he had that, and he would tell me these long jokes. So he would write it out, and it would take 15 pages. So by the time I got to the punchline, I had forgotten what the whole setup was.
I got it.
So Kimmy Rhodes, Darcy DeVille, and Guy Clark, and JT, and Verlin Thompson. And Guy had just put out the record, The Dark. I don't even think it had come out yet. He had just finished recording it.
Okay.
And at one point, he sat down with a guitar, and we all sat at his feet like school kids.
Yeah.
And he played us from beginning to end. He and Verlin played The Dark record. And I remember just sitting there with these people, and he's like telling a story. He's like, "How dark is it?" And we're all just on the edge of our. We were on the ground, but we're just. I felt like we were being told this story by an elder, and it was very memorable.
The first label that Hayes ever signed to was an independent company named Compadre Records. It had a small but highly respected roster. They released his debut in 2002. In 2007, Compadre was sold to Music World Entertainment, a parent company that included a record label, an artist management division, luxury property holdings, and, why not, a Rolls-Royce car rental service. Its owner, Matthew Knowles, was apparently keen to enter the roots music market and saw Compadre as his turnkey solution. Now, if Mr. Knowles sounds familiar to you, you might know him better simply as Beyonce's dad. By the time the sale went through, Hayes had already signed elsewhere, but the terms included Compadre's back catalog, which, in turn, included Hayes' debut. So, if you pause this podcast right now and go to Mr. Knowles' website, click on his roster, and you can find Shaka Khan, Kool and the Gang, and a younger, clean-shaven Hayes Carll. Before the term Americana came to define a genre of music, it was used more generally to denote strange, uniquely American phenomena. And I miss the use of the word in that sense. Because Beyonce's dad owning Hayes Carll's debut album is a vintage piece of Americana. And when remembered, it's one that never fails to bring a smile to my face.
Compadre was run by a guy named Brad Turcotte, and that's really all it was. It was He had just gotten out of Belmont, I think, and was starting a record company, and he didn't have any acts. He had put out a compilation record called Texas Road Trip, I think, and it had, or no, it was a drinking album. No, it was a road trip album, and it was just 15, 20 Texas artists singing about traveling, and he had asked around Houston about, who are some of the acts that are you're impressed with, up and coming people. And by that point, Ray Wiley and the Sisters Morales and different people had started to take me out and let me open at the Mucky Duck or at Dan Electro's Guitar Bar or these Continental Club, these different spots. And so I was just starting to kind of get some kind of foothold in Houston, and so I guess my name came up a couple times, and so he called me and said, I'm interested in, I have a record label and I'm interested in doing this. And so I met with him and I gave him this record that I had made, and
a CD or
it was a CD with the album cover. The CD cover was something I'd done on like a really low res graphics 1999 2000 computer program, and it was I think it was just a stock image that I'd gotten from something, and it was a pocket of the back of blue jeans, and then with my name in yellow in some font that I thought represented my personality.
Your sticky fingers vibe.
But I mean, I thought it was the coolest shit ever, and so I very proudly handed him this 8-song garage recorded, not great piece of work. Yeah. And he never called me back. And I said, okay, well, that wasn't meant to be. And so I printed out my, 150 copies, 200 copies, whatever it was, of this CD, and went out and tried to sell them. And then, so the Sisters Morales was Lisa and Roberta Morales, this band that was one of the first groups that took me out and really supported me and let me open for them. And Lisa said, "Why don't you let me produce a record for you?" Which was another really kind of fortuitous event for me, was her offering this, because I had proven that I didn't know what I was doing in the studio with this previous little demo, I'll call it now, that I had made. And I said, okay. And so we got together. I said, here's my songs. I think I had 12 that made the record. And she got Pedernales, Willie Nelson's recording studio out there in it's west of Austin, and
so just a bit different from the Garbage Man's
a little
garage
bit.
studio.
I walk in and there's gold records and an engineer telling me stories about Julio Iglesias and Neil Young and all of Willie's crews running around, and there's a band of professional, Rick Richards on drums and Jeff Blankenhorn and her husband David Spencer on guitar, and I brought a friend of mine, Burt Wills from Galveston, who was this kind of bearded biker surfer badass that I befriended in Galveston, and he came up and played, and the accordion player that plays with Patty Griffin.
I do not.
Ramos. I'm totally blanking out on his name. But
is he the guy that plays with Joe as well? Not Guzman.
It's not Joel Guzman. No, I want to say it's Ramos, but I'm maybe making that up. But I did have some fun times with Joel.
Oh, man.
You've done the Joe Ely tours, I'm sure.
I have. Well, that duo show that the two of them do, Joe Ely and Joel Guzman, is like one of my favorite band shows. And it's just the two of them.
Yeah.
And they make so much noise.
Yeah, I did a run with just the two of them years ago. And so anyway, but I went in, made this record. I went and got a loan. And a loan for $15,000, and or a line of credit, I guess it was. Mm-hmm. And with that, I went and bought a guitar. I'd been playing $100 Sigmas. This is a bit of a dog leg, but I've been playing these crappy guitars that the salt air would eat them up. I'd break a string every night. Right. The acts that were letting me open for them started kind of hinting like, yeah, you might
step it up.
We like your music, but you look like shit and your guitar sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And
it's the one thing you need. It's the one thing you need.
Yeah, we're not asking a lot here. Just have like an instrument that doesn't embarrass everybody for you. And so I went and got a guitar the day before I started the recording process, the Gibson J45 that this is still my primary guitar today, which is 15 years later. Mm-hmm. And then we went to Burning Alice and cut the record, and I sent it off to Brad Turcotte just to say, obviously you weren't interested, but I've just made this record and here it is. And he called me back immediately and said, I've got another compilation coming out called Brewed in Texas, which is a drinking record. Right. And I'd like to use one of these songs on that. And on top of that, I'd like to put out this record. Mm-hmm. And so I ultimately struck a licensing deal with him, a one-record deal for a 7-year license, which ended up being a really great deal for me. I got it. The record, I'd already paid for the record. Mm-hmm. But he brought, even though I was the first artist on the roster, he knew a lot about how the business worked and how to get an artist out there. And I learned a lot in those couple of years about how it all works, because it was all new to me. I didn't know. Sure. Okay, this is a radio chart, and this is what Americana music is, and this is a publicist and what they do. And he introduced me to Tracy Thomas, who. She was my first publicist, who became one of my dearest friends and somebody that introduced me to almost everybody I met in Nashville.
Yeah, and who, for listeners, she's now Jason Isbell's manager and the manager of St. Paul and the Broken Bones. And
John Moreland.
And she is just she's a hub and always has been a hub for this type of music. Everyone knows Tracy and loves her. So... At that point, I need a serious answer to this question. That record that you recorded, does Beyonce's dad now own that record?
No, but
did he at any point own that record?
I did have to go to his office when I needed to reorder for a while, which was Compadre was sold to Mr. Knowles. I don't know his first name. Matthew Knowles, who, so he had this record company in Houston, and he was expanding, and some of the conversations that I heard about that were pretty funny. You've had McMurtry on this. Yeah. So he was talking to Brad about. This label, and he's I think I want to buy it. He says, what artist do you have? And Brad says, well, we've got Billy Joe Shaver. Never heard of him. We got Hayes Carll, never heard of him. We got James McMurtry, never heard of him. Well, he's the son of Larry McMurtry, never heard of him. And he's like, why do you want to buy this stuff? And he said, look, I'm just expanding it. My label, and basically I think the idea was like, I don't know this type of music, you do, you know what, how this works. I just want to buy it, you can run it for me, and my empire will grow. And so that happened while my record was still licensed. So for a while, to pick up records, I would go to their compound, which was this gated building, and you had to do a security code to get in, and you'd walk in to the office, and there would be these life-size cardboard cutouts of Beyonce in the lobby, and I'd say I need 30 copies of
30
my Flowers and Liquor records, and somebody would dutifully come and hand them to me, and I'd say thank you and walk off. And
it's a weird business, man.
yes, it is.
It is a weird business that can make strange bedfellows sometimes. After Compadre, you ended up signing for a couple records with Lost Highway Records, which is clearly a step up at that point because they had Ryan Adams, and Tiff Merritt, and I guess Lucinda Williams was with them then, or
yeah, they had Lucinda, Ryan, Tiff, Willie Nelson, Lyle Lovett.
Wow.
There a lot of people were doing kind of one-off deals. So like Van
Right.
Morrison, Elvis Costello.
Oh wow.
It was a pretty impressive list of
Seriously?
of folks that were on there, and so that was yeah. I don't know if there were core artists besides maybe Lucinda and Ryan.
Right.
But yeah. So yeah, before that, before I got to the offer from Lost Highway, I made a second record called Little Rock, and that one I did independently, and was not sure what to do with it, and I was getting offers from Sugar Hill or just different places, but I just didn't see how I felt like what I was doing was. I think every artist is unique, and the path that they have is unique, and what I was getting from all these record labels that I talked to was, oh, we're going to do the Texas plan for you, or we're going to do this, and it felt like this kind of cookie cutter thing, and that's not to disparage the labels. A lot of them are iconic labels that have amazing artists and have done great work for them. But I just always looked at it like, if I'm going to sink or swim, I'm going to do it on my own merit. Like I had this fear of putting my life into somebody else's hands and them dropping the ball. Wow. And so, it was a need to, I don't know if it was micromanaging it or just afraid of letting anybody in or have to have control. But it was just always a big fear of mine, going back to that idea of people in the music business, the record deals are always set up to screw you, and I just felt like the only person I could rely on was myself.
Which is really funny because not only your outward persona, but even knowing you for many years, you're a laid back dude, and you don't sweat the small stuff. But it sounds like when it came to this trajectory, you did want to micromanage. You did want to have the loudest voice in the room regarding that direction.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did. It terrified me because I thought, okay, I can't believe I've made it this far. Like, people are offering me money. Or at least, it's a loan, but but they seem to think that people might want to hear this music. And I'm starting to do shows now, and like more than 10 people are showing up sometimes. And like, it was starting to become the possibility that I could actually make a living at this was starting to show itself, and I thought, this is unbelievable. Like, this dream is kind of coming true, and I thought about what the possibilities were down the road, and I saw these people that were struggling, that were so talented, and I had heard all these nightmare stories about people who got, signed with some big label, and then their record never came out because it got shelved because of some accounting issue, or the single didn't track well, or whatever. And I never want my career to be in the hands of some poller or radio programmer who determines that I'm not going to make it in this market or whatever.
Right.
I always wanted to be able to say I can go out and find a gig and play, and people will come up. Whether anybody ever, whether there's national recognition or I'm on the radio or what, like to find this kind of DIY grassroots thing, and people. I was looking at people like Robert O'Keefe or Fred Eaglesmith that were, making in my eyes really successful careers.
Yeah,
and yeah, they dabbled with, record labels and found the money when they needed it sometimes, but they what made them successful was that they had these audiences that were going to show up.
Yes.
And they didn't give a shit if it was a top 40 song. They loved the music and the personality and the feeling of community, and that really appealed to me. And I wanted somebody that got that. And at that point in my career, I just thought, I was also looking at it from a business side too. I said, the money they're offering me here is not that much money. And if I do this and it's successful, and I keep $7 a record instead of 10 cents a record,
right?
Okay, and if I sell, 10,000 records, like that's a lot of money.
Yes.
And if I sell 50,000 records on a label, I still won't get the amount of money that I would have sold for 10. I think John Prine had that Oh Boy Records. I remember listening to him talk about that. He says, I sell a third of the records I used to sell and I make 3 times more money.
Yeah. He never gets his due. That was like the first independent music label owned by an artist. He started it in like 1981.
Really?
People wouldn't start doing that themselves. I mean, now everybody does it, but it's 25 years later. In 1981, he went from like Arista or wherever he was at, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I mean, talk about foresight.
Yeah.
That he could do that.
Yeah, and that really stuck with me. This idea, like, you can be in control of your stuff, and financially, you're more secure, and you don't have to meet this mark. And now, it has come full circle in a way, because I don't know about full circle, but that's become the norm.
Yes,
you look at 30 Tigers and the success of that, and everybody wanting to have control of their stuff, and you can do that now.
Yes,
and realize that. That there's a real chance for profitability there.
There is. Everyone has been tripping in the last 5 or 6 years about the way that it used to be this, that, or the other. And what I'm looking at and I'm seeing a bunch of really talented people owning their own small businesses, some bigger than others, but who are paying the light bill and the rent bill with musical ideas that they had.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, if that's not magic, I don't know what is, in the world.
All these people are now running their own outfits, and they can be as involved or distanced as they want.
Yeah.
There's you can do whatever you want to do, and that's what's really cool is if you have an idea, now you can enact it, and you're not having to fight with anybody. And I've never, to be fair, I never really. I was very fortunate with the label experiences that I had, but. If I just want to promote my record on Facebook, or if I just want to do all the artwork myself, or whatever idea pops into my head, I can go do that. And there are ways to connect with people now to let them know I'm doing that.
Yes.
And I just think you can be even more uniquely an individual, an artist than ever before, because you don't need to get all these people on board to approve it.
I'm convinced that 20 years from now, younger people are going to be saying to us, like, man, you guys first came out when the internet was like still free for people to use. Like our ability to publish stuff. You hit that button and it says publish, and that's what you're doing. And people 10 years ago did not have the ability to self-publish instantly like this. Now, that means that there's a lot more shit. So it's harder to cut through. But if you've got good shit, it takes a little bit longer, but it does cut through, and people do talk about it, and it will make the rounds eventually.
Yeah. And there's so much I look at so many artists these days. I think about Mary Gauthier a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I run into her here and there, and I mean, I'm sure she. Not everything's perfect, but I look and I see her or Freddie Goldsmith or countless people. I say, there are people wherever they go. People show up. Ray Wiley Hubbard. The list is endless. They have their fans, and they have people that appreciate what they do, and they may not be household names nationwide, but they can go pretty much anywhere in the country. People will show up and listen to them, and I think there's I hate to say a niche for everybody, but like there are people that are looking for something unique, and they don't need it to apply to everybody. They want to find something that's genuine and honest, and then they're drawn to that. And if you can do that, I think they will find you.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's kind of up to you is to provide that. But
it is, and you got to keep your overhead low.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
at some point in their lives, many people have picked up an acoustic guitar. Many have drawn inspiration from a Townes Van Zandt ballad. Many have filled marble notebooks cover to cover, and some have maybe even set out across America in a borrowed Econoline van to play coffee shops that were only vaguely expecting them. What separates the dabblers from the eventual masters is equal parts luck, hard work, and a third element which is trickier to identify. Why is it that I'd rather put on a John Prine album or a Gillian Welch album or, yes, a Hayes Carll album than almost anything else? What makes them so different? It's the same instruments, the same chords, the same universal human subjects. The best description of this tricky third element I've ever heard was once read to me by a close friend in the form of a poem called Style by Charles Bukowski. Style is the answer to everything, a fresh way to approach a dull or dangerous thing. To do a dull thing with style is preferable to doing a dangerous thing without it. To do a dangerous thing with style is what I call art. Bullfighting can be an art, boxing can be an art, loving can be an art, opening a can of sardines can be an art. Not many have style. Not many can keep style. I have seen dogs with more style than men, although not many dogs have style. Cats have it with abundance. When Hemingway put his brains to the wall with his shotgun, that was style. Or sometimes people give you style. Joan of Arc had style, John the Baptist, Jesus, Socrates, Caesar, Garcia Lorca. I have met men in jail with style. I have met more men in jail with style than men out of jail. Style is the difference, a way of doing, a way of being done. 6 herons standing quietly in a pool of water, or you, naked, walking out of the bathroom without seeing me. Touring can be a lot of fun. It can be really stressful in some ways. What are some strategies you've learned over the years to manage that stress or enjoy it the most?
Well, I don't think I learned anything for a long time. I think I'm just starting to learn. I just turned 40 in January, and in the last couple of years, I've finally started to learn some stuff. For a long time, the longest time, I loved it. I loved every bit of it, and I cannot believe that I get to drive to a different city every night, drink my face off, run around, people shout, usually positive things, and get up there and spout my words out, and and just, you know, I joined the circus, and I loved every bit of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there was anything I would change. I just wished, I wished I had more money and could have stayed in better hotels or in a hotel. You know, there's a lot of times just sleeping in the car or wherever you could lay your head. But it was magical to me. And then, but I did not manage that. Along with that, came a lot of negative things. You know, it was, I'm not Peter Pan. I don't want to be I wasn't really growing up. I was sort of stuck in this place of, perpetual partying, and so my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health were all suffering, and I didn't realize it. It sneaks up on you because you get used to it, and people don't really understand, I think, what it's like every day to get up, whether you're hungover or not, get up, drive 6 hours, eat shit food, get to the next place, sound check at some dingy rock club, meet some guy named Zeke who doesn't give a fuck about your sound and who's in charge of presenting that night, and then go eat another terrible meal, go perform for people who may or may not care about you, but then get that rush and then try and come down from it or chase it until you can fall asleep, and then get up the next morning and do it all over again, night after night after night, year after year after year. And it just, I feel like all other areas of my life sort of suffered as a result, and my kind of identity and who I thought I was and my character and all these things were getting lost or not being attended to, or they weren't growing. Yeah.
It's fun. Like for me in the touring thing, I think people don't really realize that when you work every night in a club, alcohol is super, super normal in a way that it's not in the rest of the world. And, I just would remember getting off tour and going out to dinner with like my wife's friends or something, people who worked normal jobs, and being like, "Oh, why don't you guys drink 4 beers before dinner?" Like, I don't, what's your problem? You know what I mean? But to me, I was going slow.
We're not doing shots, so what's the big deal?
What's the problem? It's 4 beers. It's an occupational hazard. For sure that I've
and I don't even like I don't really consider myself a big drinker. Like I never drink by myself. And by myself, I mean like when I'm not in a bar, I'll drink by myself in a bar. But, but even socially, like it was, I had to get ramped up for it. I wasn't dying for alcohol, but when you're on the road, it's you're traveling around. I mean, on my rider is fifths of alcohol and cases of beer, and people are handing you drinks all night, and we're here at soundcheck, let's have a few, and now we're about to go on, or we got dinner, let's have a few, we're about to go on, we need this, and then we're doing the show, we're really enjoying it, and you can slip away from you really quick, and then you get off stage, you're hammered, and you've got a bunch of people there at midnight or 1 a.m, and they say, well, let's go show you Charlotte. And
we're paying.
And we're paying. Yeah. And well, hell yeah. And the next thing you know, you stumble in your room at 4 a.m, and we're leaving at 8.
Yeah.
And dude, I got tired of the hangovers,
Dude, thanks so much for stopping by today. I had a blast.
It's great to see you, and enjoyed talking to you.
That's our show for this month. Thank you for listening. A big thanks again to Hayes. His newest record, Lovers and Leavers, is now available everywhere via 30 Tigers. Today's episode was engineered and mixed by Matt Schusler. Research and editorial direction for today's episode was provided by the intrepid and thorough Paul Barbagallo. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive pair of jeans is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.